Good morning. You're listening to Drinking Socially, the official Untappd podcast.
Your weekly look into what's happening in the Untappd community and the world of beer. This episode is brought to you by Untappd and the Untappd store. Use the coupon code PODCAST to get 20% off your next purchase at store.untappd.com. And the coupon code is just podcast. That's it. Save some bucks. You know the drill. You know how coupons work. And don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, leave a review if you want in your favorite app reviewing place. Every time you like, follow, subscribe to us, I send my past self a message to buy Bitcoin. So far it hasn't worked. But let's keep working on it together, folks. We can get there. We can figure out time travel through Campbell's chicken noodle soup, like the little letters. That's how I'm doing it. It doesn't matter.
I think that's alphabet soup, Harrison. Should we edit this out and start? No, that's fine. Harrison sends his past self a note to buy Bitcoin and alphabet soup to decode.
I think there's a chicken noodle that has the words in it, the letters in it. Maybe it was a limited release for Campbell's. They just couldn't get the market to accept letters and chicken soup together.
You had to show up at the Campbell's tap room. It was one can per person only.
That's it. That's familiar.
Definitely. And by now, I can kind of guess what you're all thinking. John, this is silly. The moon is made of cheese and has been since half a second after the first Big Bang. Check your facts.
Oh.
And those of you that have listened to the show for a while probably know by now that I do not check my facts, oftentimes making them up on the fly. I will do a verbal credit to anyone that's corrected me over the years. It's happened once or twice. But the moon scientifically is actually made up largely of rock and metal, much like the busiest section of a record store.
That's it.
Or Earth and Mars. It's covered in these fuzzy rock pieces scientifically called regolith, which probably should be a beer name. That's where the moon kind of looks fuzzy when you see the pictures on there. And it is pale, often white or pretty much devoid of color. Largely, that's due to the way that we perceive it, because light has to travel a long ways through the atmosphere and space to get here. And by then, there's not much color left. However, even if you were on the moon, you would find more water than color. I'm pretty sure that's scientifically true. There is actually some water on the moon. Yep. It's not used to make beer. But what I love about the moon is it's become kind of like a singular beacon that anyone that's ever drank beer at a campfire, you can look up at that moon in Denmark or Belgium or Boston, and we're all looking up at that giant rock monster wondering the same thing. Is there enough water to brew a beer on the moon? And the good news is you can try, because in the most futuristic part of our journey as humans, we've already got about 100 or so nations that have all agreed no one can own the moon. It's pretty much ready for you to go there and set up a brewery. I'm sure Brewdog's already planning on it. And the hardest part on Untappd would be we'd have to really rush to create a badge for checking in beer brewed on the moon. Would it be the space case or the space race badge?
Yes.
Who knows? And where am I going with all these moon talk for? So we're going to kind of beam back down to Earth and drink something as familiar as the moon, but much easier to get your hands on. We're drinking a pale ale, a beer that traces its origins back to the 1700s, when malt roasters began using a different fuel form that gave off less smoke. And this would therefore color the malt a little bit less. And you would have these beers that were a lighter color than the typical beers of the time. And how does that tie all this together? It doesn't. But by now, we can finally drink a beer, and we're all maybe a little bit better Jeopardy contestant. Harrison, if I haven't space talked you to sleep yet, can you let everyone know why I'm talking about the moon so much?
I think you've space talked me to life, John. I feel alive with the opportunity and adventure that is right in front of us all to be a space-faring generation, hopefully. We'll see, though. What's for certain is that we're going to drink some beer tonight and level up a badge, one that I kind of need some work on, which we'll get to in a minute. But
don't we all?
And all right, for those of you playing at home, Pale as the Moon is the badge of the day. This one's pretty classic. We thought definitely should, do an episode on it. Great style, all that stuff. We'll talk about it. But for starters, the description of this badge says, the trusty pale ale, crisp, refreshing, and always a good choice in a bind. True. You have to drink 5-room pale ales or American pale wheat, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Not just pale ales. It's kind of pale beers, some of them, to unlock this guy. So pretty straightforward badge, not one of the goofier ones that we have. Drink 5 pale ales or American pale wheats. Great. You're on your way to that next level, the Pale as the Moon badge. And we have a killer beer, one that has a lot of history for me, been for both of us, really, to help us along this little journey as we enter the launch pad and fuel up the rocket. A lot of rocket puns. Let's get the rocket puns going. I was a little slow, but the language is coming to me now. The launch pad.
Apollo, call you later. I wish I would have thought that one through a little bit better. But, the beer we're drinking tonight.
Yes.
One claw for man, one giant pale ale for mankind. Can we slip that in there?
Son of a gun. That's it.
So Westbrook Brewery's One Claw American Style Pale Ale, 5.5% ABV. They give us an IBU measurement of 30, which we know is generally a guideline at best. One day, Harris and I are going to talk about IBUs. On Untappd, this beer rates 3.76, which mathematically puts it well above the average. And for a pale ale, actually pretty good rating for the style. Westbrook tells us this is a zesty and tropical pale ale brewed with a touch of malted rye, smokeless. Well, not these days. You can pretty much do whatever you want, but a touch of malted rye and citra hops. And on Westbrook's website, they also mentioned that they do a little dry hopping with citra and Azaka. Harrison's a big fan of Azaka. I'm a big fan of Harrison's first sip. It's generally when his mustache comes to life. It's like an animated cartoon falling off of his face back into the tulip glass, or sometimes his mouth.
Ooh.
Now that those of you that only listen to the podcast got a glimpse of YouTube. Harry, how we doing on the One Claw?
Harrison has facial hair. That's right. Blowing a lot of people's minds tonight. Oh, man. This is such a cool beer. So if you guys have been listening to the podcast for a little bit, maybe you're yelling at your car radio or your computer or whatever, saying, isn't One Claw the first beer Harrison checked in on Untappd that earned him the newbie badge? It is! Huzzah! So special place in my Untappd heart for this beer. And okay, first sips, it's classic. It's a classic pale ale. It's fluffier than I remember. That doesn't really mean anything. It's got that nice like rye zip. Love rye in a beer.
Yes.
We can talk about that, but definitely not overpowering. There's just kind of this one little spice note that hits you. And then it's great nose. There is that like very, it's like, man, light pineapple. There's like a little bit of grapefruit there. It's not intense. I would say it's all just very balanced. This is a beer that, like, again, I've had one sip and it's half gone. So that's the best. Said it before. If the first sip is also your second to last sip, the beer is good, and that has passed the first gulp test. What's happening over there, John, with you? What's going on in your glass?
Very much the same. If I had to try and take this beer apart, usually in the form of an analogy. It doesn't, I don't get an analogy. I get like a comfortable, nostalgic, you're drinking a beer. And it's, I guess the way I would describe it is like not pejoratively, but in a good way, this beer doesn't go too far in any direction. There's, like you said, a little bit of grapefruit. I think I get on the nose, some tropical, some pineapple. Yeah. What I really appreciate is, I'll blame it on the carbonation, but that fluffiness of this beer, I immediately, when I taste a beer that has that texture, I always kind of identify it with a talented craft brewery. I feel like I never get that fluffy beer texture from something that's been sitting on the shelf for a year or two. I don't know if that was a good descriptor for this beer, but
but it was what's happening.
It tastes good.
Exactly. But I think that's a lot to be said for that. The kind of the mouth feel, the body of this beer, and it has. I mean, it's got rye in it, like we said. It's got a little bit of wheat, so the wheat may be playing there a bit with the body. But it's a very straightforward beer. It's got pale 2-row malt in it, rye and wheat. They use an American ale yeast on this, so like a very straightforward, probably the same or very close to the yeast that you find in almost all of Sierra Nevada beers, and therefore like all of Dogfish Head's beers, like that classic Chico or American ale yeast, 5.5%, as John said. And I didn't know they use Azacca in here. I remember the Citra being a thing. But yeah, the Azacca, I think that pineapple, it's like a hidden little pineapple note. But this is, I mean, it's a pale ale. It's not supposed to be the thing where you sit here and go, whoa, what's happening? This is blowing me away. This is like I'm at the beach, I'm on the boat, I'm grilling, and all of a sudden I've had 3 of these and I'm laughing and having a blast because they're delicious. They go down smooth, but it's there's enough going on there.
Maybe this will help the people listening at home or driving to work, and you can't drink a beer because you're on your way to work or driving. But either way, everybody that listens to this show by now, if you don't already, you should know Harrison's a pretty big fan of Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale. Same style, similar, we'll call these beers cousins. How does this beer, in your mind, how does this beer differ from Sierra Nevada Pale Ale?
Sure. The color right away jumps out. Sierra Nevada's is going to be a bit darker than this, and the wheat could be playing into that. The rye, again, it's really just one quick little spicy note, but it's different enough. Although, and then Sierra Nevada's pretty much 100% Cascade. I think they use a little bit of Pearl hops in there now as well. So that's similar. You're going to get those like citrusy notes from Cascade. Citra is a more pronounced version of that, I guess. Cascade is just so distinct. This does not hit like the same like piney and citrusy notes that a Cascade hopped beer would. But in terms of like, they're about the same ABVs. It checks the same boxes for me, even though like the taste is different enough. The look is different enough. The mouth feels a bit different. Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale isn't as fluffy. If we're gonna keep saying fluffy, that's fine. But it kind of is. It's like it has some bounce to it. Sierra Nevada's, it almost drinks like Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale to me almost drinks like a really hopped up like English ale. Like the malt profile is more complex. They use darker malts in it than you would find in like a lot of pale ales, as you said in the intro. It really is about the color here, at least historically it has been. So there's enough differences. But for me, like if I'm looking for a pale ale, if I want a pale ale tonight, this will make me just as happy as Sierra Nevada's would. You know, it has that, whatever that is, that kind of intangible box that's in my head somewhere that says, yes, pale ale. This checks it the same way that Sierra Nevada's does.
Yes.
Which is cool.
As an aged craft beer drinker, pale ale is kind of like, for me, craft pale ales are like my dad's Bud Light. Like Founders All Day. That's my Bud Light beer. I've drank so much of that beer. And it's a pale ale as well. Sierra Nevada. This one, One Claw from Westbrook. They're all those beers, like a pale ale, I agree with you, isn't meant to be like, you're not going to find tequila barrel aged lacto fermented pale ale. And if you do, buy it and check it out because it's probably weird as hell. But generally, these are the beers that I think are produced for you to consume a whole 6-pack of while you watch the Buffalo Bills get their butts kicked or kick other people's butts.
Right.
Now
it's a different time, John. We're living in the age of the bull, of the buffalo, whatever you want. The bull, the buffalo, the Plains Bowl, also known as the Buffalo.
The Plains Bowl, yeah, the college team. There's a lot of. I'll forgive you for that one.
Okay, good. And jumping back to this beer quickly. So One Claw, obviously, this is their pale ales. We've easily established, but this beer, or this part of Westbrook's kind of brewing range, has really taken on like a life of its own, where it started out with One Claw, but now you have Two Claw, which is like an IPA version of this, but it's a hazy IPA, and it's 7%. It's got a bunch of Azacca and Eldorado and Citra in it, which is pretty cool. And they use the Conan yeast, which is like the really famous yeast that Petty Topper uses, and tons of very well-known hazy IPAs. So you have Two Claw, then you have Three Claw, which is like a double IPA. Conan yeast, a bunch of Cascade actually, and CTZ in that one, as well as Citra and Azacca and Eldorado. They like that Azacca, Citra, Eldorado combo for the dry hop, which is like a fruit basket, punching you in the face. That's exciting. And then Four Claw most recently is what I've seen out there in the world. So talk about a terrifying crab.
Yeah, Four Claw is a family of crabs. That's
exactly right. Yeah, right. We're the Four Claws. It's just a bunch. It's at 10.5%, triple IPA, gigantic beer. That one I haven't had yet. And then for the holidays, they do Santa Claus, which I love. Yep. And they kind of throw in more pine forward hops in that one. I love that beer. Every year I get it, and I don't know. It's like one of those. It's funny. I always forget it's a seasonal, and then it comes out, and I'm like, this is one of my favorite beers. And it's gone before I get to enjoy more of it. And that one, very similar. Yeah, Centennial in there is and Cascade and CTZ, which are more kind of piney and also citrusy hops. So they're for Santa Claus a little bit hazy holiday IPA. So this little crab has really kind of taken on a life of his own for Westbrook, and it started with this guy with One Claw. So I'm pumped we're enjoying it together this evening, and this is pretty readily available. If you're in like the Southeast, you should be able to find One Claw at a lot of spots. So I hope you guys can, and you can check it out, because I'm digging it. I'm enjoying the heck out of it. I might grab a second one when you start talking, John. I may slide off screen and then do that old thing.
It's nighttime. You can.
You're right.
No one's going to yell at you for drinking too many beers. If they do, we don't review the show if you're going to yell at Harrison for drinking too many beers.
I can't take it.
I tried to look before we were getting ready to record tonight and figure out where the claw obsession comes from in Westbrook's history, and I wasn't able to really nail it down. I assume, like most people, they just like crabs. But I did kind of dig out a pretty interesting story about the brewery's origin stories, named after the founder, Edward Westbrook, who's not like some brewers. You can tell like they've got that like Hollywood personality. Put me in front of a camera, let me talk to people in the tap room. Right. Edward Westbrook, not that type of brewer. But as far as I'm stitching this story together, all of Westbrook Brewery was basically created out of a challenge issued to him by his girlfriend, who was picking on him for drinking cocktails in college. And, why aren't you drinking a beer? So she kind of throws a gauntlet down. He becomes obsessed with home brewing. The girlfriend becomes obsessed with home brewing. Fast forward, now they're getting married. Edward and Morgan get married, which is a huge endeavor. And they brew a beer for their wedding to give to people as a parting gift, which is, if ever you want to invite me and Harrison to your wedding and you're going to send us away with beer, we will certainly we'll show up.
Right. We'll come back for each wedding you have.
But the beer that they gave away, and I think this is before Westbrook was properly founded, between these two now serendipitous Romeo and Juliets of beer, they gave away was Mexican cake. Ooh. And later, obviously, this becomes the beer that tips every beer nerd off to Westbrook. Like I remember hunting down the distribution truck to try and get a bottle of that when it was first starting to come to North Carolina. So it's a cool story. Like, how many of us have had our significant others pick on us about something? Everybody should be raising your hand. Right. And the Westbrooks turned it into a wildly talented and successful brewery out in South Carolina. I thought that was pretty cool. Still don't know about the claws, though.
Well, and we may get a chance to ask them. So if you guys do live in North or South Carolina, you're near a Lowe's Foods, and you're looking for something to do on June 19th, come join us. Stop by your local Lowe's Foods. Right now, we're actually, you've heard us talk about it before, but Lowe's Foods is doing these virtual beer hunts that John and I have been hosting with Untappd and in different breweries. So we started out with Noda. Then we did Edmund's Oast, which was a blast. I mean, they've all been amazing. We're finishing up with Westbrook on June 19th. And what Lowe's Foods has done is they've put together a box. They're amazing. I have one of them over here, but it's covered in crumbs from all the snacks, so I'm not going to grab it. But it's a box of beer where it's going to be 5 different beers from Westbrook and then a bunch of snacks and pint glasses and swag. It's a whole thing. It's very well done. And then we get together virtually on June 19th. You click on the link that they give you in the box, and you get to watch John and I talk to people at Westbrook. And word of the street is Edward maybe making an appearance, a cameo maybe, and we'll definitely be asking about One Claw. Where did the name come from? Was it just a really spirited fiddler crab that, you know, wouldn't go down when the tide came in and was knocking him back? Or is there a
space reference about the moon?
Is it maybe about the moon, like most things actually are? If you look one level deeper, we're all just jealous of the moon, angry at the moon. But it's so free and floating there. How's it doing? But he probably doesn't have answers about that. But we'll talk about beer, talk about One Claw, drink some beer, have some laughs. Those boxes are available now at Lowe's Foods. So you go grab them, just head into the beer den, ask for the Westbrook virtual beer hunt box, and we'll see you guys the 19th. And if you happen to show up after watching this show, I think just use the hashtag One Claw or the Claw brought me here or drinking socially or something. Let us know in the comments. There's tons of comments. We take questions. It's a lot of fun. I've been having a blast. Every time I eat an entire bag of trail mix during the break. So when we come back and I'm trying to ask a question but can't yet, and John saves me, that's why you now have the inside scoop. My mouth is full of trail mix.
It actually happens most days during a lot of our meetings. Right. But it's a necessity for those beer hunts with Lowe's. I was publicly intoxicated at the end of the Edmund's Oast one. It was a good thing we stopped when we did.
Yeah. Oh man. But they were a lot of fun and very cool. I mean, learned a ton from Edmund's Oast, learned a ton from Noda. I'm sure it'll be very much the same from Westbrook. So yeah, join us if you can. We've been having a blast. And there's some really cool beers. I mean, One Claw will be in that box. 4 others. Word on the street, one of their smash beers. They do really cool sour series. Fruited sours will be in that box as well. So stuff you don't see all the time, which is also really cool to have a pretty unique experience with these beers. So check it out if you can. So we'll see you there.
And speaking of stuff I don't see all the time, Harrison, usually you'll give me a breakdown of some of the more popular beers that people are using to find their trip to the moon. I wish we called it that to get their pale as the moon badge.
That's right.
Which is
how do you do it?
I'm willing to bet a lot of money that Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale is in the top 3, top 2. In fact, I would wager this Untappd hoodie that it is the #1 beer that people have used to unlock this badge. I'm probably going to get my butt kicked by something Lagunitas did, but
maybe.
Do you have a breakdown to save me my shirt?
I do, and hopefully, right. Well, depending on your stance here, hopefully John keeps his shirt on. Maybe not. We'll see what happens.
Everyone's agreeing with that. Yeah.
But Yes, I do have the breakdown. And as we spoke about before, this really isn't just about pale ales. There are a couple different beer styles that unlock this thing. So to read through this, I want to tell you those all first. So you're like, why is that beer there? So it's wheat beer, American pale wheat, pale ale Belgium, Imperial Pale Ale, Pale Ale American, Pale Ale English, New Zealand, Australia, International, New England, and Pale Ale Milkshake. So all of those kind of sub-styles and iterations of either pale ale or really pale wheat ale in this case, that gets you one step closer to the next level of this badge. So it's really cool going through these top beers and picking, kind of seeing what showed up here. So first up, no drum roll needed. John gets to stay clothed. It is Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale with 23,000 plus unlocks. And that's closely followed by a little something something ale from Lagunitas, which is pretty neat. And then you have Sam Summer, which I think comes in as like, I guess it must come in as like an American pale wheat, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, I always thought that was a lager.
Right.
My bad.
Yep. Yeah, no. And then 312 Urban Wheat from Goose. Oberon is on here. Dales is on here. 420 from Sweetwater. And then Orval, which is technically a Belgian pale ale.
Wow. Boom. Orval's great.
I know. We will do, I know, I'm sure if you're a fan of Orval, you're right now saying, you should do an Orval day, an Orval episode. Every year I forget about it until it's already happening. So eventually we'll do that because that is the best beer in the world, according to a lot of very smart people. So we should have it on here and talk about it goofily. But a very popular badge too, 1.5 million unlocks. So,
wow.
So pale ale, pretty common beer. Unlocks tell that story too. And yeah, Sierra Nevada sit at the top, not just on the top of my Mount Beermore, but on the top of this list of top beers that unlock the Pale as the Moon badge.
Cool to see a little something from Lagunitas. Yes. I don't know anything about time, but I feel like that beer hasn't been around nearly as long as Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale has, and it's already in second place.
Right, I know. And that was one, I mean, obviously Lagunitas is kind of all over the world now, which is pretty impressive. And that's another, that range of beers, there's like little something, little something wild. There's like so many different.
Yeah, little something would be a successful brewery if it was just that brand.
Right, that's right. Indeed. So yeah, impressive stuff, but great company there. A lot of classic beers, kind of beers that built the American craft beer world.
Goose Island's 312. I remember selling that to people that had no idea what craft beer was. The tap handle just shouted at you, 312. I'll have one of those, whatever it is.
Yeah, Sam Summer is, I mean, it is the classic summer beer. There's Dale's Pale Ales in here, Sierra Nevada, obviously. Pretty cool list to be in. So, yeah, it's funny, right? All these beers that maybe you take for granted, or a style you take for granted, it's so important to where we are now. Wouldn't be here if Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale didn't shake some people out of their safety zones and say, wait a second, I think I like this. What else you got? And now here we are. Enough people said that, and boom. Now we get to drink crazy, right, tequila, barrel-aged, pale, whatever's.
Yeah, hopefully only once. But,
but how are we doing on this, John? I'm going to ask you first. On our personal trip to the moon here, are we still in the stratosphere? Are we floating somewhere near the asteroid belt? What's going on?
I think I'm probably hung up like somewhere in between Earth and the space station, which I'm pretty sure is between us and the moon. I'm not 100% sure, but Harrison backs me up, so I believe it now. So yeah, we'll say that I've probably stopped off at the space station to do a bottle share with those talented astronauts. And then I just decided to stay there because I think they also have pizza. And rumor is one time they sent a female into space and sent her 17 years worth of female hygiene products. Right. So there's a lot of stuff up there to hang out and enjoy.
Prepare.
This is just me neglecting to advertise that I'm at level 19 on Pale as the Moon. But I'll qualify it by saying pale ales. I've drank 100 levels worth of Founders all day. Yeah. But You kind of find your comfy place in the pale ale world. Drank a lot of Magic Hat number 9, but when I'm out at a brewery, I probably will if I'm getting a flight. But the first beer I'm going to look for is like, what's your double dry hop this or that? Do you have a barrel aged something or other? I want to start with something that's going to ruin my palate, and then stumble into the next place as I walk through this town. Anyways. The last beer that I leveled up with is from Finkel and Garf out of Boulder, Colorado. I got that beer from Beer Drop.
Nice.
And I went back and looked at the check-in, and I was talking about how much it was full of grapefruit pith, almost peppery. Pith is a fun word to say on a podcast. I just realized full pith. And Finkel and Garf, I can't see what's on tap at your tap room. You don't publish a beer list on Untappd, but I have had a few friends check into beers there over the last month or so. Nice. So I'm confident they're open. No idea what they're making, but I mean, the name sounds like a fantastic Adult Swim cartoon. So I'm sure there's more to it, but I love it.
I love it. Yep. I remember my bridge over beer water. I don't know. Nothing. That's a horrible joke. I don't make a Simon and Garfunkel, Finkel and Garf joke. It's fine.
Yeah, there's room to mine that one for later.
Probably
Please
later.
tell me you're at level 18 or less, Harrison. I expect you to. The pale ale is like your Argyle sweater. I hope you're doing at least better than me.
But very much the same story as we kind of learned when we did the Das Boot Badge. We both love German beers. We both love like the same 5 German beers. So we weren't nearly as far along as we thought we might have, just based on the volume of German beers we've had. Similar story here, although I will say that I am at level 22. So close company. We're both kind of orbiting. Perhaps I've just left the space station. You're hanging out in the bottle share. I've just missed it, and I'm drinking wine.
You're Neil Armstrong. I'm that guy that stayed on the spaceship. No one remembers his name.
Doug Collins? That's
well done. All right. Maybe that's right. Who knows?
If I owned it, no one would have called me out. Doug would have. Anyway, level 22. Most recently unlocked that, I think, just this past weekend, actually, with Double Nickels Weekend Warrior Hazy Pale, which was in a stovepipe killer deal. It was like $3 or something for 19 plus ounces of delicious hazy pale ale. It was awesome. We should I'm going to try and grab some Double Nickel for the show. We haven't done much Jersey beer.
I didn't know they were in North Carolina. That brewery's cool as heck. Beautiful logos and brand. Yeah,
and actually went there across the river from Neshaminy Creek, and we helped them when they first got started with a few things. So a lot of memories there, but they've been taken off, and I'm seeing them more and more right down here in North Carolina. So happy to discover that beer. But it was delicious. And I have like 1 million check-ins of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. So again, had tons of pale ale in my life, but most of it's just been made by Sierra Nevada, which isn't surprising.
Not at all. And so kind of coming away from our excuses for our levels of pale as the moon, or excuses. One thing I want to do to shout out before we close out this episode is the verified venue of the week. And this one's really serendipitous. And what you should read is John didn't have to do a lot of research. The location I want to shout out belongs to Westbrook Brewing. And it was easy to find because they made this beer, went to Untappd, looked for Westbrook's tap room, found it in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. If you're not familiar with South Carolina, Mount Pleasant is basically Charleston, South Carolina. It's just on the other side of a bridge. And the reason I chose this venue is because Westbrook makes the beer that we're drinking tonight. And you can check them out on Untappd. You can see their beer menu, which does have the guest handles. What I really love about, if you're fortunate enough to visit Westbrook, they have like kind of a special bottle list for the tap room only. So you can find like 4-year-old Mexican cake. You can find some really weird barrel-aged stuff that you wouldn't likely find elsewhere. Also, food trucks. Charleston is an amazing city for food, and the burgers with, the food trucks look incredible. So if you're planning a trip, my advice would be shoot for the end of November, late November, early December. That's usually when they release Mexican cake. Grab a bottle, bring it home, share it with friends. In my opinion, one of the best beers Westbrook makes, one of the best beers I've ever had. Yeah. Certainly worth a pickup. But if you're not interested in going to South Carolina and you live in a state that earns you the freedom of ordering beer through the post, you can use Edmunds Oast online portal, because Edmunds Oast is a brewery right near Westbrook, and oftentimes they'll stock some Westbrook beers. So you'd be able to order online through Edmunds Oast and have the beer shipped to you, like I said, if it's legally allowed. Wow. Harrison, I know you said Westbrook was your first check-in on Untappd. Right. Have you ever been to their tap room?
Unfortunately, I have not. Yeah, we got stuck going over the bridge, or not going over the bridge. There was just too much oysters and meat and cheese and things like that in Charleston proper, as I know you know as well as I do, to actually make it out to the Chapman itself when I was there last. But looking at this draft list with beers like beer to drink when it's hot outside, which is, of course, American light lager, and Maximum Florida, which, looking at the pictures of it, looks like a smoothie beer. It looks amazing. But they also have 2 claw on, and 4 claw, and 1 claw, and then a bunch of variations right now of Mexican cake with the base beer, and then Mexican coffee cake, and Mexican cake tequila barrel aged 2016 on draft. So, yeah, if you're an Imperial Stout fan, I'm sure you've stopped listening and started running to Mount Pleasant. But yeah, haven't made it there yet, but we're lucky. We're about 3 or so hours away from those guys. So it is a nice, easy kind of long weekend. And it's what I've been wanting to do. Now seems like it might be the time to, maybe I'll just wait till the holidays, like you said, and get some fresh Mexican cake. Maybe we'll pull some more variants out of the basement then.
Yep. Use it as an excuse to leave everyone home for Thanksgiving and just bow out of a holiday celebration where you argue about politics. Nope.
You've got the dishes. I'll take my sandwich to go. I've got beer to drink in a state away. So it's on the list. But yeah, Charleston is an amazing beer town. And Westbrook is kind of, well, one of those breweries that was, I guess you could credit with really breaking through, and Westbrook came, and now there's 20 plus more that are doing amazing stuff. And so cool to see that they're doing as well as they are, and lucky that we get to drink some of that beer right here.
Absolutely. And so Charleston, meat heavy city, a lot of good food. And it's nice to see some really talented brewers setting up down there as well. Like, if you enjoy treating your palate, I couldn't advocate enough for a visit to Charleston, and stop at Westbrook and look for Charlestown Fermentory as well. That's a really talented, they don't distribute very much, but speaking of good beers, Harrison, it's been a long week since I talked to you. What's the first beer that comes to mind when I say like best beer you've drank since we last spoke?
Yes. So something that's, well, become a bit of a summer seasonal, well, maybe I'm being misleading there, from Hopfly Brewing Company, who I've spoken about a ton last season. I've been trying to not mention them each week this season. But their beach beer came back out. And so beach beer is like a 4.9% hazy, session IPA. It's amazing. They use Citra, Nelson, Sauvin hops in it. So it's like just a sessionable, crushable, delicious beer, and it's back. So they kind of are making it known now formally that this is going to come out every summer. They're going to brew as much of it as they can from May through, August or September or so. So get it while you can. And it's just that. It's perfect beach beer. And it'd been since last summer when I had it last, and it was as good, if not better, than I remember. Which always nice. When it's seasonal, you kind of return to it, and you're like, holy guacamole, this is still packing the punches that I was hoping it would, and then some. So that was a shoo-in for best beer of the week. And I got to get another 4-pack or more before it runs out at my local bottle shop. Although I did say they just rebrewed another batch of it, so I'm okay. All right. I was in panic mode for a second, but now I'm back. But that was an easy one for me. What about you, John? What really fired your engines this past week on the beer front? What got you going?
much along the same kind of method that you took. It's summer, it's getting warmer, we're closer to summer. So my favorite beer is called Endless Ending. It comes from Anchorage. It's a gigantic barley wine. Back when Tavor, depending on how affluent you want to sound.
Sure.
Back when they used to ship to North Carolina, I got as many of those as I could. It may be the best barley wine I've ever had.
Ooh.
And I was doing like a panel with craft beer industry people, where there was a girl named Laura Lodge, and she is, if you've ever been to the Midwest, you probably know Laura for her big beers and barley wine events. She's incredible. And she reasonably loves barley wines, and we were just talking about them, and I grabbed one of the bottles and I put it in the fridge and I drank it the next day, and all of a sudden it was over and it was morning time again. Barley wines. Yeah.
Time travel. It hasn't been invented, or has it? I need that with my soup and the Bitcoin.
Way to pull it full circle.
As it always does, sometimes accidentally. But holy guacamole, I've already said that. Holy enchiladas. Another
Holy
show in the books.
moon
Holy mole. Yeah, that's it. We're done. We did it. We knocked another episode out. Thank you, everybody, for listening and hopefully laughing along with us. You know where to follow us. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Untappd Online. Comment here. We read all of them. John's better at responding than I am, but sometimes I'll jump on the Untappd handle and respond there. So, yeah, let us know what you're thinking, stuff you want next episode, other badges to talk about. Give us the feedback. We look at it all. Want to be talking about stuff you guys want to talk about, so let us know what we should do next. And speaking of next, John, what is happening next week? What are we doing?
Yeah, next week, seriously though, leave a review, comment on Harrison's t-shirts and band posters, because I saved them all in a giant post-it note file. Anyways, next time you hear our voices, it's going to be 4 days until summer is officially here in the U.S. anyways, and most of us in this hemisphere. But anyways, enough about the moon and meteorology. Next week, we're bringing the heat, and it's going to be the Summer Fun Badge, which has a pleasant wrinkle that will kind of unwrinkle. We'll iron out for you next week as we unlock the Summer Fun Badge.
That's it. So until then,
I think cheers.
Yeah, a little bit left.
One gulp and the beer was half. There it is. Finish it up.